Welcome to 5 Good Minutes.
You're listening to today's inspirational message on the book of Hebrews
with Kurt Bjorklund.
In Hebrews 11, we get the statement about what faith is, that it's the confidence in what we hope for and the assurance of what we do not see. And then we read by faith Abel, by faith Enoch, by faith we read about Noah, we read by faith Abraham, and all of these have things that are worthy of considering, which I'm just going to leave right now and let you consider those. And then we come to verse 13. It says, all these people were living by faith when they died. They did not receive the things promised. They only saw them and welcomed them from a distance, admitting that they were foreigners and strangers on earth. People who say such things show that they are looking for a country of their own. If they had been thinking of the country they had left, they would not have had the opportunity to return. Instead, they were longing for a better country, a heavenly one. Therefore, God is not ashamed to be called their God, for he has prepared a city for them. And I know here in Hebrews, I've quoted from William Barclay a fair amount, and I found his commentary particularly helpful, especially on this section, because there's something I had not seen before as I was just reading through this, preparing for this. Here's what he says, that we are to live as permanent strangers. And then he says the writer of Hebrews uses three vivid Greek words about them. In 11:13, he calls them xenoi. That's, if you're transcribing it, Xenoi. Xenos is the word for a stranger, a foreigner. In the ancient world, the fate of strangers was hard. They were regarded with hatred and suspicion and contempt. In Sparta, xenos was the equivalent of a barbarian. One man writes, complaining that he was despised because he is a xenos. Another writes that however poor a home is, it is better to live at home than to live in a foreign country. When clubs had their common meal, those who sat down in it were divided into members and non-members, or xenos. The xenos can even mean a refugee. All their lives, the patriarchs were foreigners in a land that was never their own. The second word is in Hebrews 11:9. So now we're going back up here a little bit into where Abraham was talked about, where he's called a stranger in a foreign land. And he says here he uses the word parakene, to stay for a time. A parakos was a resident alien. The word is used of the Jews when they were captives in Babylon and in Egypt. Anyone called a parakos was not considered much above a slave in the social scale and had to pay an alien tax. Such people were always outsiders and only became members of a community as a result of a payment. And then he comes back to 11:13. He says he uses the word paradidomos for a person who is staying there temporarily and who had a permanent home somewhere else. Sometimes the stay was strictly limited. A paradidomos was someone in lodgings, someone without a home in a particular place at a particular time. All their lives, the patriarchs were men who had no settled place and that they could call home. It is to be noted, in the ancient world, to dwell in a foreign land was considered humiliating. A certain stigma was attached to a foreigner in any country. In the letter of Aristes, the writer says, it is a fine thing to live and die in one's native land. A foreign land brings contempt to poor men and shame to rich men, for there is a lurking suspicion that they have been exiled for the evil that they have done. And then he goes on and just says basically that all of the days of the patriarchs, they were considered to live not in their home, but in a strange land, and that this is what faith is to be able to say, I am not making this world my home because I have this biblical image of saying I'm a stranger in this land. Now, again, this doesn't mean that you don't invest here, don't live here, that you treat this world as merely temporary, but what it means that you don't lose your vision of hope, that you don't lose your vision of this idea that you were created not just for here and now, but for what God is ultimately weaving. And this means that you can live here with a sense of calling to somewhere else and knowing that you will not always be celebrated here and now. Certainly in our era of debate in our nation about immigration, There is something to understanding the difference between a resident and an alien or an immigrant in a different land. The standing, the status, and saying your standing, your status is somewhere else. And it is a good thing to remember as you live and move in this world.
Thanks for joining us here today. There's a lot of great content to explore on Orchard Hill Plus and on the Orchard Hill main feed from the weekend. Have a great day.